The severance paperwork sat between us, crisp and insulting, while the 29-year-old executive smirked over his iced cold brew. He thought he was cutting dead weight from the enterprise. But he did not realize he had just severed the digital artery keeping Apex Vanguard Logistics alive. I gave them 15 minutes before everything collapsed. The silence in the executive conference room was heavier than the summer humidity outside. It was a thick, suffocating quiet, broken only by the rhythmic tapping of Chadwick Miller's pen against the polished mahogany table. He was not even looking at me. He was staring out the panoramic window at the downtown skyline, feigning a deep executive burden that he had never earned and certainly did not feel. "So, Daniel," Chadwick said, finally turning his gaze toward me. His eyes were cold, glazed over with the supreme confidence of someone who had never managed a mortgage or worried about rising medical costs. "We feel that we are at a critical crossroads, Daniel. A divergence of paths, if you will." I sat perfectly still in my chair. My hands were folded neatly in my lap, resting on the fabric of slacks I had bought 5 years ago. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that I prayed did not show in the pulse of my neck. Divergence of paths. It was corporate speak for pack your desk and leave immediately. "I am not sure I follow your meaning, Chadwick," I said softly. My voice was steady and measured. It was the exact same voice I used when the core database servers caught fire 6 years ago. The same voice I used when the payment gateway crashed on Black Friday 3 years ago. It was the voice of the senior systems engineer who fixes disasters when everyone else is running around in total panic. Chadwick sighed, a theatrical exhale that fluttered the edges of the single document that Jennifer Ross, the human resources representative, had slid across the table. Jennifer could not bring herself to look directly at my face. She was studying a microscopic scratch on the table surface, her cheeks flushed with quiet shame. "It is about operational velocity, Daniel," Chadwick said, leaning forward in his expensive fleece vest. "Apex Vanguard Logistics is pivoting to an agile cloud-native posture. We need corporate synergy, we need rapid iteration, and frankly, Daniel, your traditional methodology represents legacy bloat." He pronounced the words legacy bloat like a contagious disease. "My methodology," I said slowly, "kept the vendor management system from collapsing during the multi-state corporate merger last year. My legacy code is currently processing 40,000 transactions every single hour without a single recorded error." Chadwick waved a hand dismissively, as if swatting away an annoying insect. "That is precisely the point. You are focused entirely on routine maintenance. We are focused on market disruption. We need fresh eyes who are not afraid to break things in order to make them better." He signaled Jennifer to proceed. Jennifer finally looked up, her eyes filled with visible apology, and pushed the legal folder the rest of the way toward me. "We have prepared a transition package," she said softly. 3 months of severance, outplacement services, and temporary benefit continuation." My stomach dropped into a cold abyss. 3 months of severance after 14 years of unbroken loyalty. My mind did not wander to my professional pride or my career standing. It went straight to my daughter Chloe. Chloe Vance was 20 years old, a college junior carrying a demanding chemistry course load while managing a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes that did not care about corporate restructuring. Her insulin pump supplies, her continuous glucose monitors, her specialist appointments, it was all anchored to the Apex Vanguard Group policy. The policy that was currently being revoked by a boy who treated our enterprise architecture like his personal sandbox. 3 months, I repeated quietly. "I have served Apex Vanguard for 14 years, Jennifer. It is the standard cap for this restructuring tier," Chadwick interrupted, checking his smart watch. He was bored while dismantling the livelihood of a 54-year-old man. "Look, Daniel, do not make this harder than necessary. Sign the papers, hand over your security badge, and clear your office by 5 o'clock in the afternoon." Chadwick stood up, grabbing his cold brew and leaving a wet ring on the polished wood right next to the termination agreement.
"We appreciate your dedicated service,"
he added, turning his back to me to scroll through his phone messages. "But the future waits for no person." I looked at his back, then at the severance agreement. A profound, icy calm washed over me. It was the cold clarity of a surgeon recognizing that the patient has already flatlined and there is nothing left to do except record the time of death. I stood up slowly. I did not reach for their pen. I reached into my jacket pocket, unclipped my master security badge, and slid it across the mahogany table. It spun smoothly, coming to rest right beside his cold brew cup. "You have got about 15 minutes, I said. Chadwick paused, frowning in confusion. "Excuse me?" 15 minutes, I repeated softly, until the entire enterprise system collapses. "Maybe less. Is that a threat?" Chadwick scoffed with a nervous laugh. "Because I can have corporate security escort you from the building immediately. I am not making threats, Chadwick. I am stating mathematical facts. Good luck finding my operational documentation." I walked out of the conference room, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind my departure. The walk from the executive suite down the main corridor felt like moving underwater. The fluorescent lights of the hallway hummed with a familiar frequency that I had memorized over 14 long years. I passed the heavy steel door of the main server room, knowing the acoustic hum of those hardware racks better than the engine of my own truck. I knew which cooling fan in rack 4 had a slight bearing wobble. I knew which fiber patch cable in the plenum ceiling needed careful handling every few months. I passed cubicles filled with colleagues I had supported through countless late-night deployments. There was Sarah in accounting. I had painstakingly recovered her corrupted hard drive 2 Christmases ago, saving years of unbacked-up family records. She smiled and waved at me through the glass partition. She did not know yet. There was Marcus in shipping automation. I had authored the background script that automated his daily freight manifests, so he could go home at 5 o'clock to dinner with his children. He was talking animatedly on his phone. I could not bring myself to wave back. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the lobby button. As the steel doors slid shut, sealing me off from the 14th floor, the physical weight of unemployment at 54 years of age landed full force on my chest. With a diabetic daughter relying on my financial assistance and a pension 4 years away from full vesting under Title 29 U.S. Code Section 2101 Warren Act compliance guidelines, panic clawed at my throat. I forced myself to execute controlled breathing until I stepped out into the bright afternoon sun. Instead of driving home immediately, I walked 2 blocks down to Hank's Tap House. Hank Kowalski, an ex-Navy veteran whose silence was more comforting than most people's chatter, looked up from behind the timber bar. Seeing my pale face and the subtle tremor in my hands as I placed my cell phone on the counter, he did not ask a single question. He simply reached for the maker's mark, poured a double neat, and slid the glass across the wood. "They finally pulled the trigger?" Hank asked, his gravelly voice calm and steady. "Effective immediately," I replied, lifting the glass. My hand was steady now. "Idiots," Hank muttered, wiping the counter with a cloth. "How long do you give them?" I checked my watch. It was 4:43 in the afternoon. 12 minutes, I said. Hank raised an eyebrow, resting his elbows on the bar. "That precise?" "It is a house of cards, Hank." I was the only person holding the structural foundation together. I took a sip of the bourbon. The warmth grounded me. I looked down at my cell phone sitting quiet and black on the wooden bar. A sleek piece of glass that represented the digital coffin of my career. But I knew exactly what was occurring inside the silicon chips of the data center 4 blocks away. Chadwick Miller and his high-priced consultants had committed a fundamental error common among arrogant executives. They assumed enterprise software operates by magic. They did not comprehend that the cloud is merely someone else's physical computer, and computers are unyielding logic gates. They do precisely what they are instructed to execute. Every afternoon at 4:55 in the afternoon, the master vendor API token for Apex Vanguard Logistics was programmed to execute a mandatory cryptographic refresh. For the past 3 years, that critical security handshake had been managed by a background service script named Watchdog API. It resided in a restricted administrative directory on my primary workstation drive, mapped to the core domain controller whenever my administrative profile authenticated. However, I was no longer logged in. My user credentials had been revoked the exact moment Jennifer processed my termination. "You look like a man waiting for a demolition charge to detonate," Hank observed, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Not a demolition, I corrected him softly. A systemic suffocation. Imagine the oxygen being slowly drained from a sealed room. At first, nobody notices. Then a few people feel lightheaded, and then suddenly everyone is collapsing while searching for the emergency air tank. I built the air tank, Hank, and when they threw me out, I took the key along with my personal belongings. To understand why this situation cuts so deeply, you have to understand what Apex Vanguard Logistics used to represent. When I joined in 2011, it was an enterprise run by serious yes professionals who understood that moving millions of dollars in freight required absolute precision. I did not merely write code. I engineered the digital nervous system of the entire company. I had spent cold nights sleeping on a folding cot in the server facility during the Great Blackout. I had missed my wedding anniversary dinner when a massive ransomware attack threatened our financial databases, working 30 straight hours to manually filter malicious packets and shield our servers. I saved the company over $4 million that weekend alone. My reward back then was a handshake from the founding CEO and a modest wooden plaque, and I was content with that outcome. I did not seek accolades. I took professional pride in knowing that when a freight driver in Ohio swiped a distribution card, it validated instantly. When a warehouse manager in Rotterdam requested an inventory audit, it generated cleanly. Then came Chadwick Miller, 29 years old, holding an expensive degree from a business school where the curriculum appeared to consist entirely of corporate jargon and unwarranted confidence. He arrived 8 months ago after marrying the current chief executive's daughter. His initial action as vice president of innovation was installing a treadmill desk in his glass office. His second action was calling an all-hands meeting to announce that our infrastructure, the resilient platform I had built over 14 years, was embarrassingly outdated. He never reviewed the uptime metrics. He never analyzed why our system maintained 99.99% reliability. He simply disliked that the administrative dashboard lacked flashy animations and modern web frameworks he had read about in industry blogs. During our initial one-on-one meeting weeks before my termination, Chadwick had bounced on his heels, his wireless earbuds gleaming white. "Why are we utilizing these custom background scripts, Daniel? There are subscription, cloud services that handle these integration tasks. Those cloud platforms do not process our legacy data formats." Chadwick, I had explained with patient clarity, I authored those integration tools to bridge our legacy mainframe records with the modern logistics portal. If you eliminate them, the external shipping portal cannot read our warehouse inventory. Then we simply migrate all 40 terabytes of legacy data, he said casually, as though 14 years of complex transaction records were a simple desktop file transfer. That is a 2-year enterprise project, I informed him. And until that migration is funded and executed, these custom scripts are the sole mechanism holding the operations together. He rolled his eyes with condescending dismissal. You senior engineers always exaggerate complexity to justify your existence. It is job security engineering. I see right through it. That was the moment I realized my fate was sealed. He did not view me as a guardian of stability. He viewed me as an expensive obstacle standing between him and his press release about digital transformation. He began excluding me from architecture meetings. He hired a boutique consulting agency staffed by 24-year-olds who generated 60 pages of colorful charts, concluding that our IT staff was bloated. And through all of it, I maintained my discipline. I kept the systems running. I applied patches, because that is what a true professional does. Sitting at Hank's bar, staring at my phone, I recognized my fatal misstep. I had made my work look entirely effortless. I had smoothed over structural flaws so seamlessly that Chadwick truly believed the ground beneath his feet was naturally flat. He was about to step into an open abyss. My cell phone vibrated sharply. The screen illuminated with an automated high-priority alert from the monitoring system I had engineered years ago. ALEC code 503. Master gateway unresponsive. I looked at my watch. It was 4:56 in the afternoon. Precisely on schedule, the phone vibrated again. Second alert, billing module disconnected. Vendor synchronization failed. I took another sip of Maker's Mark. The steady vibration of the phone against the wood felt like cosmic balance being restored. It has begun, I said to Hank. The education of Chadwick Miller. The phone did not merely ring. It burst into a frenzy of incoming alerts. It skittered across the polished wood of the bar, vibrating with a frantic energy that mirrored the catastrophe unfolding 4 blocks away. I watched the screen light up repeatedly in the dim tavern light. Incoming call. Jennifer Ross, HR. Incoming call. Chadwick Miller, VP. Sex message from Marcus in logistics. Daniel, are you seeing the Enterprise console? Everything is flashing red. Master API is offline. Sex message from Chadwick. Pick up your phone right now, Daniel. We have a minor glitch. Need your login? Are you going to answer that call? Hank asked, looking at the device like it was an unexploded ordnance. I am no longer an employee, Hank, I replied, my voice steady. I am just a private citizen, enjoying a quiet evening drink. I picked up the phone, not to answer, but to flip it face down on the counter. The persistent buzzing continued, rattling against the timber, but I ignored it completely. Instead, I pulled a small black leather notebook from my inner coat pocket. It was a habit I had maintained since my earliest days as a junior systems administrator. Always document events in real time. I opened the notebook and uncapped my pen. 4:56 in the afternoon. Watchdog API authentication failure triggered. 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Cascade failure to inventory and dispatch modules. 5:15 in the afternoon. Regional distribution hubs lose real-time sync. I was recording the breakdown of Chadwick's illusions. I finished my drink, placed a $20 bill on the counter, and told Hank to keep the change. If anyone asks, Hank, you have not seen me today. Hank nodded slowly. Go home, Daniel. Get some rest. I walked out into the cool evening air. Traffic was backed up along the boulevard, typical for 5 o'clock, but for the first time in 14 years, I felt no urgency. I was not checking server health metrics at red lights. I drove my Ford truck at a relaxed pace, listening to classic rock while my phone vibrated continuously in the passenger seat like an angry hornet's nest. When I arrived at my suburban home, the house was quiet. My wife had passed away 5 years ago, and I had poured myself into raising Chloe and securing our future. I walked into my home office, a room lined with technical volumes and spare networking gear, and opened the fireproof safe in the closet. I turned the dial, left to 32, right to 14, left to 88. The heavy steel door clicked open. I bypassed insurance policies and title deeds, reaching for a thick blue folder labeled Employment Agreements and Intellectual Property Addendums 2011. I sat at my desk, switched on the brass lamp, and carefully opened the contracts. I needed absolute legal precision. I knew I was right, but in corporate conflicts, documented evidence is the only armor that matters. I turned to page 12, paragraph 8, subsection B. Intellectual property rights regarding personal tooling. Any software utilities, automation scripts, or procedural code created by the employee, primarily for personal workflow optimization, developed outside of core duty hours without utilizing proprietary company source code, shall remain the sole intellectual property of the employee. The company is granted a non-exclusive, revocable license to utilize said tooling solely during the term of the employee's active employment. I traced the words with my thumb. Revocable license during active employment. I had personally negotiated that exact clause when I was hired in 2011. Early in my engineering career, I had witnessed a predatory firm seize a custom diagnostic utility an engineer had built on his personal laptop. When I joined Apex Vanguard Logistics, the founding legal counsel, an honorable attorney named Arthur Henderson, had signed off without objection, remarking that keeping clear boundaries was good governance. I opened a storage drive containing my personal development archives. I possessed complete Git commit logs showing timestamps at 2 o'clock in the morning on weekends, authored on my personal hardware using open-source libraries. I was not a former worker holding company code hostage. I was a software owner whose temporary license had automatically terminated upon my discharge. Suddenly, my phone chimed with a distinct priority ringtone assigned to my daughter. I answered immediately. Chloe, is everything all right? Dad, I am at the University Health Pharmacy. Her voice sounded anxious. My prescription card was just declined for my insulin pump supplies. The pharmacist said the insurance coverage was canceled today. What is going on? A cold wave of anger swept through me, burning away any remaining trace of sentimentality toward my former employer. They had cut our health benefits effective immediately. Someone in human resources, acting on Chadwick's directives to streamline offboarding costs, had terminated my policy before the business day even closed, disregarding standard transition protocols. "Do not worry, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice soothing. "Give the phone to the pharmacist." I spoke directly to the pharmacist, instructing him to charge the entire $900 cost for Chloe's monthly supplies to my personal credit card. "We will sort out the corporate coverage later," I assured the pharmacist. "Just ensure my daughter leaves with her required supplies." "Of course, Mr. Vance," the pharmacist replied. After hanging up, I looked at the missed notification count on my phone. 64 text messages and 18 voicemail notifications from Apex Vanguard executives. The panic in their messages had escalated dramatically. "Chadwick. Daniel, pick up. The entire shipping gateway is locked." "Chadwick. This is not funny. The board is demanding answers." "Jennifer, Daniel, please call Chadwick. The warehouses cannot scan incoming manifests." I smiled a cold, razor-sharp smile. "Let them sweat," I murmured to the empty room. I slept soundly that night, sustained by the calm of absolute preparation. I rose at 6 o'clock the following morning, brewed fresh coffee, and sat on my back porch. At 7:15 in the morning, my phone rang from an unrecognized Washington, D.C. area code, Corporate Legal Counsel. I let it go to voicemail. At 7:30 in the morning sharp, Chadwick called directly. I took a slow sip of coffee and answered, "Hello, Chadwick. Daniel." Chadwick's voice came through high-pitched, stripped of every ounce of his executive arrogance. I could hear chaotic shouting and ringing phones in the background. "Where have you been? I have been calling your cell phone since yesterday afternoon." "I am unemployed, Chadwick," I replied evenly, leaning back in my porch chair. I was enjoying my morning coffee. That is what legacy bloat does when released from duty. "Drop the sarcasm." Chadwick snapped, his voice trembling. "What did you do to the system? The entire vendor integration grid is completely down. Freight trucks are backed up for 2 miles outside our main Ohio distribution center. We are losing $50,000 every hour. I did not do anything, Chadwick." "Do not lie to me. It functioned perfectly yesterday morning. You left the building and 3 hours later the core network collapsed. You planted a logic bomb. Security is auditing the access logs right now." "Audit them," I said calmly. "Examine every single line of code. You will find no logic bomb, no malware, no unauthorized commands." "Then why is the system unresponsive?" he practically screamed. "Because the Watchdog API service failed its scheduled authentication at 4:55 yesterday afternoon." "The what?" "The Watchdog API background script, Chadwick. The utility that handles token authentication between your legacy database files and your new cloud platform. It requires a valid, active administrative security certificate to execute." "Then fix it." "Rerun the script. I cannot," I explained smoothly. The administrative certificate was anchored to my user profile. When Jennifer disabled my domain account on your explicit instructions at 4 o'clock yesterday, the security certificate was permanently revoked. Then reactivate your account. Give me your administrative credentials." "I cannot do that either, Chadwick. I no longer work for Apex Vanguard Logistics. I have no authorization to access your network. I will reinstate you right now," he blurted out, desperation leaking through his words. "Temporary contractor status. Come into the office immediately and re-authenticate the script. We will pay your standard daily rate." "No," I said softly. "What do you mean, no?" Chadwick's tone shifted, trying to sound intimidating. "Listen to me, Daniel. If you do not come in and resolve this failure, I will have our legal department sue you for intentional sabotage and destruction of corporate property. We will destroy you financially." "If you wish to discuss property, Chadwick, let us discuss property law," I said, standing up and walking into my kitchen. "Those integration scripts maintaining your supply chain are not corporate property. They belong exclusively to my ownership." "What absurd nonsense are you claiming? You wrote them while employed here." "Examine my original 2011 employment contract, Section 8, Subsection B, under Intellectual Property Rights regarding personal tooling. Those tools were authored on my personal time, on my personal hardware, using non-proprietary frameworks. I granted Apex Vanguard a non-exclusive, revocable license to utilize those tools exclusively during the duration of my active employment. When you terminated my employment, that license automatically revoked. The software did not break, Chadwick. It was repossessed by its rightful owner under Title 17 U.S. Code Section 106. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the line. "You are bluffing," he whispered. "Consult your legal department," I advised. "And Chadwick, you referred to my work as legacy bloat during our meeting. Those scripts were the bloat you wanted eliminated. You achieved your goal. Your infrastructure is now fully streamlined, Daniel. Wait. You have approximately 2 hours before the automatic backup validation checks fail," I added, looking at my watch. "When those fail, the database cluster will hard lock into read-only mode to prevent data corruption. At that point, you will not be able to process a single freight order. How do we prevent that catastrophe?" he gasped. "You are the Vice President of Innovation, Chadwick. Innovate." I ended the call. By noon that day, news networks reported Apex Vanguard Logistics stock dropping 12% amid operational collapse. My retained attorney, Charles Montgomery, called to inform me that corporate legal had threatened an emergency injunction. Under Title 17 U.S. Code, Section 106, your personal tooling ownership is ironclad, Charles assured me. Furthermore, canceling your health coverage without statutory notice violates Title 29 U.S. Code Section 2101 Warren Act guidelines. When Charles brought up potential claims of technical negligence, I revealed that I had authored a comprehensive 200-page operational manual, which Chadwick Miller had ordered deleted in writing 6 weeks prior, claiming documentation hindered agile progress. I had archived the entire email chain. That is extraordinary evidence of gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty on his part, Charles stated. Meanwhile, Chadwick published a defamatory post on social media accusing me of criminal sabotage, but Marcus in shipping publicly called out his hypocrisy before the post was deleted. That evening, a process server delivered a lawsuit from Chadwick claiming emotional distress. I added it to our evidence file of executive misconduct. At 8 o'clock that evening, Jennifer Ross called in tears, stating that board chairman Gerald DuPont demanded my presence on an emergency board call. My consulting fee is $5,000 per hour with a $20,000 advance retainer, I instructed the human resources representative. And Chadwick Miller must be present on mute. 24 minutes later, Apex Vanguard transferred $20,000 to my bank account. I joined the executive conference line. "Mr. Vance," Chairman DuPont boomed, "we are losing $100,000 every 15 minutes. Restore our network immediately. My credentials remain revoked," I stated. "Reactivate him immediately." DuPont ordered. Chadwick tried to interject, but DuPont silenced him. I authenticated remote access, repaired the index table corrupted by Chadwick's unauthorized override attempts, and executed the Watchdog API service. Within moments, distribution dashboards across 5 states turned green, clearing shipping queues instantly. DuPont then asked about the missing system documentation. I forwarded the archived email chain where Chadwick had explicitly ordered the deletion of the 200-page manual. A collective gasp echoed across the board line. DuPont's voice turned ice cold. "Mr. Vance, thank you for your intervention. The board will handle internal executive matters immediately." Before hanging up, I informed DuPont that continued use of my software required a formal commercial licensing agreement through Charles Montgomery under Title 17 U.S. Code, Section 106. "Draft the contract tonight." DuPont ordered his legal team. "We are finished with foolish experimentation. Good night, Daniel." The corporate fallout was immediate and uncompromising. The following morning, news outlets reported that Chadwick Miller had been summarily terminated for gross negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, and dissipation of assets, escorted from the building by security before 9 o'clock. 3 days later, Laura Albright, Senior Executive Vice President at Stratum Systems, called to offer me the role of Vice President of Enterprise Infrastructure Resilience. The position doubled my former salary, included equity, and prioritized long-term system stability. 6 months later, I testified as the lead expert witness in a major shareholder class action lawsuit against Apex Vanguard's former executive team. Sitting in a Chicago deposition room, I explained how Chadwick's reckless actions violated California Penal Code Section 470 guidelines regarding corporate reporting and asset protection. The collapse occurred because inexperienced executives removed the load-bearing walls of an enterprise to make it appear modern. I testified. They discharged the engineers who understood the foundation because they mistook stability for legacy bloat. Chadwick sat in the corner, defeated and facing personal civil liability. Following the deposition, my bank notified me of a $75,000 quarterly licensing payment from Apex Vanguard for my Watchdog API software. They were paying me significantly more to rent my code than they had paid me as an employee. Driving home in the afternoon sun, I pulled into my driveway and greeted my neighbor Howard Lawson. "How is the new executive role treating you, Daniel?" Howard asked. "It is outstanding, Howard," I replied. "They respect genuine experience, and they value structural stability. That is everything an engineer could desire. Did you hear about your old company? Stock is down 40%. I heard," I said softly. "Do you ever miss it?" I looked toward my house, seeing Chloe studying happily in the dining room, her medical needs fully secured by my new platinum healthcare coverage and my financial independence established. "No, Howard," I said with complete peace. "I spent 14 years trying to keep a sinking ship afloat because I felt obligated to save it. But sometimes, the only way to demonstrate that you were the one keeping the vessel dry is to step off onto solid ground and let the reckless owners face the ocean alone." Howard smiled and handed me a cold drink. "To solid ground, Daniel." I clinked my glass against his bottle. To solid ground, we stood together in the fading light, watching the sun dip below the horizon. I had a major infrastructure network to design at Stratum Systems. It was going to be complex, rigorous, and completely bulletproof, because that is what true craftsmanship requires. We build things that last.